Welcome to yet another episode of Game of Thrones Abridged on Alt Swift X. Today we are reading Jon 6, A Game of Thrones, the 49th chapter of Game of Thrones. And this is a pre-recorded episode of Alt Swift X. This is not live streamed, but the next episode, I think, will be episode 50, the half-centenary of Alt Swift X. That's pretty exciting. A milestone I don't think anyone expected this particular season to reach when we began, but we're gonna get there, and it's gonna be exciting. So, if you can, be ready. It'll be Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be live broadcasting worldwide the 50th episode of Alt Swift X, and you are invited to participate. We're going to have the comments turned on in a little chat stream, and we might do a little Q&A or something, have a bit of audience interaction. That'll be very exciting. So that'll happen this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Be there or be oblong. So without further ado, we're going to read Jon 6, A Game of Thrones. And this begins with the food description, of course, because Jon Snow is breaking his fast on apple cakes and blood sausage. Apple cakes and blood sausage. Name a more famous duo, a more iconic duo than apple cakes and blood sausage. It does sound kind of tasty, though I'm not convinced by the notion of blood sausage. That is a thing, though, isn't it? I imagine the Germans are quite into blood sausage, but any kind of food with blood in it, unless it's a stallion heart like Daenerys, is not really my kind of jam, to be honest. But anyway, so Jon is breaking his fast, and Samwell Tarly plops himself down next to him. Samwell Tarly is a corpulent gentleman, and so he has the ability to plop. I don't suppose fat people have very many advantages over the general population, but they can do one thing that their skinnier brethren cannot, and that is to plop. So Sam plops next to Jon at the breakfast table, and Sam's like, holy shit, you won't believe it. Good news, I'm out of training. I'm no longer being subjected to Alyssa Thorne's cruel fighting training with the wooden swords, getting beaten up and calling me a pig. That's not happening anymore because I'm done with training and I'm now going to enter the Night's Watch proper. And Jon Snow is like, really? Because in truth, of course, Jon arranged this by going and talking to Maester Aemon. Jon did that whole argument about how, well, surely it makes sense to not try to train Sam to fight because he'll never be good at fighting. It's not in his nature, and instead we should just pass him right on to be a Night's Watchman proper, and he can just go straight into doing something that he's actually useful at, like helping Maester Aemon with writing. So Jon actually arranged this whole thing, but he doesn't tell that to Sam. He just acts surprised when Sam says, yeah, I'm going to be working with Maester Aemon. It's exactly what I need. This is fantastic for me. I'm not going to be beaten up by Alyssa Thorne all the time. Isn't this great? And so Jon says, well, look, that's great news. I'm sure you'll do a good job. And Jon is smiling. Jon has a knowing smile. For once, Jon Snow knows something that Sam doesn't. He knows that he arranged the deal with Sam's training, and so Sam is very excited and anxious about all this, and he is plopping and bouncing in this page. He's like one of those inflatable bouncy toys that you give to children with it's like an exercise ball but with the handles on the top so you can bounce around. That's what Sam resembles in this chapter. And so they leave the breakfast nook. I like to imagine it as a breakfast nook that the Night's Watch have their breakfast in. It probably has some fancy sort of hipster decor and furniture, sort of a rustic sort of a vibe, and they probably sell some bircher muesli and quinoa and all of those delicious things. That's probably what they serve at Castle Black. And then they head out of the breakfast nook and they And they notice the wall. It's quite a sunny day. This is early in the series. Winter is not yet threatening to come. It's not. It's not even. It's it's not even approaching orgasm. Winter isn't anywhere near coming. And what that means is that it's sunny and it's a bit warm, which means that the ice of the wall is melting a bit sometimes. There's water trickling down the sides of the wall, which just sort of happens sometimes. But it sort of raises the question of, well, doesn't that mean that they need to replace that lost ice? But like I think it's like they say sometimes that they do like add to the height of the wall with like gravel and stuff, adding it onto the top. But presumably it has to be some magical means maintaining the wall's structure, because otherwise it doesn't make an awful lot of sense to have this giant ice block remaining for time immemorial. The physics, the engineering don't necessarily make sense without a generous sprinkling of fairy dust, which is magic, which is why this is a fantasy novel as well as a political one. So we can have both human drama and sick dragons and swords. A perfect compromise, the best of both worlds. And they go into the Sept. So in the books, Castle Black has a sept, a temple, a church of the faith of the Seven. In the show, there is no such sept. I think there is generally more time given to religion in the Game of Thrones books than there is in the show. Which is, I guess kind of understandable, because if you got to save money and you got to cut some stuff, I guess you might as well cut some of the religious stuff. But it's still interesting. It adds an interesting, realistic layer to the societies in this fictional world, right? Like something that people often note of The Lord of the Rings is that The Lord of the Rings has this incredibly detailed world and these cultures and even whole languages and histories and civilizations and all these details that J.R.R. Tolkien poured into Middle-earth. And yet, curiously, it's very curious that the peoples of Middle-earth don't seem to be religious. The hobbits don't seem to worship any gods. The men of Gondor and Rohan don't seem to worship any gods. The elves don't seem to worship any gods, at least not overtly in the main stories. And of course, yes, there are like these prehistories of the actual gods, because of course there are actual gods in the history of Middle-earth. But it nonetheless remains a very curious little fact that there is very little overt religion in The Lord of the Rings. And there are all sorts of perspectives you could take on that, because of course Tolkien himself was a devout Catholic, I think, or some kind of devout Christian, and there's all sorts of talk about Christian themes in The Lord of the Rings and to what extent and debate and stuff. But the point is that it's cool and interesting and realistic the way I think George Martin has incorporated religion into Westeros and Essos and all of the different religions. You've got the drowned god, you've got R'hllor, you've got the old gods, you've got the faith of the Seven, you've got even more obscure gods, the Black Goat and Bacalon, the unearthly child or something, who by the way is from one of George Martin's sci-fi books, I think. He actually references himself with one of those gods. You know that you've sort of done it as an author when you can start referencing yourself. When you have enough of an oeuvre of established work that you can start borrowing ideas from each other's books and referencing your previous books, is when you know you've got a cool body of work. Or maybe you've just got a poor memory and you're accidentally plagiarizing yourself. That would be embarrassing. Anyway, so there's religion in Game of Thrones, is the point, and Castle Black has a sept, and the sept is where they're going to conduct a holy ceremony. And so inside the sept we have a lot of the symbology of the faith of the Seven. We have a crystal, and the crystal is all prismatically, physically inclined to split the light that passes through it. So the crystal, there's probably a term for that, isn't there? It's like the cover of that album. What's that album where the light passes through the triangle and it splits into all the different colors? Is it Pink Floyd? I should really know that. Anyway, so rainbows and crystals are symbols of the faith of the Seven, and the Night's Watch has a resident septon, a resident priest called Septon Keladar, and he's doing some priestly things, making fragrant incense go about and saying some things, and all the regular priestly stuff, because again, the faith of the Seven is more or less like Catholicism. And John notes that this little sept in Castle Black is a little bit like the little sept in Winterfell, because when Catelyn Stark came to Winterfell to marry Ned Stark, Ned built her a little sept for her to worship in, because she, from the Riverlands, worships the faith of the Seven, whereas the Starks of Winterfell are of the First Men, and they worship the Old Gods. So it was quite a nice little romantic gesture for Ned Stark to build Catelyn a sept. It's like how I believe the Taj Mahal was built by some Indian bloke for his lover or queen or wife, I believe. Am I making that up? The Taj Mahal, I think it was built as a gesture of love to someone. So Ned builds his own little Taj Mahal, his own little seven-sided Taj, for his lady Catelyn Stark, which is rather a nice romantic gesture, I would say. Next time you want to show a girl you love her, build her a sept. Or a Taj Mahal, whatever's more fitting within the constraints of your budget. That's what I'd recommend next Valentine's Day. Side note, there was this guy called Mansa Musa, who was like one of the richest people of all time. He was a guy from Mali in Africa many centuries ago. And something that he did was that he was so wealthy that he decided one day, fuck, I better show off my wealth. He was a Muslim and he wanted to go to Mecca. He wanted to do the pilgrimage to Mecca. So Mansa Musa crossed the Sahara Desert, going from sub-Saharan to what do you call the above bit? Above Saharan. Sub-Saharan, above Saharan. There's a term there. But he crosses the Sahara Desert, and he's carrying tons of solid gold with him, because I suppose that's a currency at the time. He's so wealthy. He's got all these slaves. He's got all this salt. He's got all these valuable goods, but most of all, he's got gold, and he's just carrying around tons of gold with him just because he can, and he gives it away as he's going along on his pilgrimage. But the other thing he does, which is why this is so relevant, is that while he's on the road to his pilgrimage, every week, I think it was, reportedly, he built a mosque. He built a temple along the road every week as he was traveling. So like the Indian bloke who built the Taj Mahal, and like Ned who built the sept, he was just building fucking sacred places left, right, and center just because. Fuck, why not? It's dope, it's cool, it's a symbol, it's a gesture. I don't know if he was doing it for a woman, or for women. Maybe he had a woman every week, and it was like a Playboy of the Month kind of thing, or Playgirl. What's the term? Like Hugh Hefner did that stuff, didn't he? Playmate of the Month. Maybe Mansa Musa, the wealthy Muslim playboy that he was, maybe every week he had a new favorite woman, a new mistress, and he built a mosque for each week as he went on his pilgrimage. There's some historical African fan fiction for you, which if you're not coming to Old Swift-X for that, what? Anyway, so they're in the sept. All the Night's Watch people are gathered there, and Septon Kelladar is holding court, and Septon Kelladar for once is sober. Kelladar is a notorious drunk, as some priests are wont to be. George Martin is interested in the corruption of religion, is one of the ways he explores religion. Like a lot of the septons, the high septons in King's Landing are corrupt and fat and diddling little kids, as some priests in our own world are. So Septon Kelladar is often drunk, but this time, for once, he is not. He is sober, and he is conducting a ceremony, and all the important Night's Watch people are there. Lord Commander Mormont is there, Alistair Thorne is there, Maester Aemon is there, the First Builder Offal Yarwick is there, Bowen Marsh is there, Jeremy Riker is there, all these important people are there. And all the first years. Remember that John's arc in this book is basically Harry Potter's arc in the first book of Harry Potter. The Night's Watch is Hogwarts, Jon Snow is Harry Potter, and all the first years have gathered in the Great Hall under Dumbledore to be sorted into their various houses, into Gryffindor and Slytherin. That's basically what's about to happen here, in Harry Potter terms. But Mormont gives this cool speech. He gives this cool speech that sort of summarizes what some of the ideology and the values of the Night's Watch are as an institution. So he gives this really cool speech where he's like, all right, yo, you guys are all the lowest of the low. You're all criminal scum. Scum and villainy is what you all represent as first years. Because, of course, these guys are mostly recruited from dungeons, and you guys are mostly the unwanted refuse, the exiles, the ne'er-do-wells of Westeros get sent to the Night's Watch. That's what normally happens these days. And so Mormont is like, y'all ain't shit, but when you join the Night's Watch, all your past sins are forgotten. All of your old family names are wiped away. At the Wall, we are all one house, one family. And when you make your vow, when you take your vow tonight to officially join the Night's Watch, all of your past loyalties, all of your past grudges, all of your past wrongs, all of your old loves will be wiped away, and here you will begin anew. Which is kind of cool. It's kind of a interesting idea, not necessarily an unappealing one, depending on what your life situation is. The opportunity to wipe away all of your past mistakes, to start with a clean slate, and to begin a new life, a purposeful life on the Night's Watch. I suppose, connecting to the theme of religion, that's something that joining the priesthood or joining a nunnery, becoming a nun or a priest or a monk or something might represent in some historical and contemporary contexts, right? Becoming a man of religion is about joining an institution, giving your life to a higher purpose, and often it's about wiping away your old failures and your old crimes. And the Night's Watch is similar. You're wiping away your past wrongs and becoming a part of a new family bound by a new purpose. Which is a cool, sweet ideology and all, but you gotta note that Mormont, Lord Commander Mormont, for all his talk of like wiping away the old family name and the old connections, he's wearing a coat that has silver bear claw fastenings. Bear claw, because of course House Mormont, their sigil is a bear. So that's one of many, many examples of people in the Night's Watch actually retaining some of the trappings of their old identities and their old families, especially the nobility. These guys are supposed to give away all of the like signs and markings and loyalties of their past affiliations, but oftentimes they kind of simply don't entirely do that. So of course, as ever in the real world and elsewhere, the ideology of an institution does not always match, the ideal does not always match the reality, and that is very much the case for the Night's Watch. But Mormont is saying, so you wipe away the old, and now you become dedicated to the protection of the realm. You don't serve a king, you don't serve a family, you don't work for love, you don't work for honor or for gold or for glory. Your one concern when you join the Night's Watch is to protect the realm. So it's a pretty important distinction to show that, like, the Night's Watch isn't officially beholden to the king. The king of Westeros does not technically, supposedly, theoretically, actually rule over the Night's Watch. The Night's Watch only serves the realm, like Varys supposedly does. Which on the one hand is, like, great, because it's like, sure, that should mean that you are, ultimately benevolent, altruistic, determined to do what's right, regardless of whatever any politician tells you. But it can also be tricky, right? Because trying to do the right thing without any kind of institutional guidance from a king or some kind of political system or some kind of government or otherwise can leave you dangling like a ballsack in the wind, as some might say. It can be tricky to decide what the correct course of action is, what the correct policy is, when you don't have an outside structure to determine what's what. But I suppose they do have the internal structure within the Night's Watch, like the Lord Commander Mormont and all those other officers, whose job it is to determine the course of the Night's Watch. Bit of a governmental aside for those keeping score. So the Mormont gives this speech, and he reminds everyone that once you have made this vow, that means you're committed to the Night's Watch, and it means that if you desert, if you leave, the punishment is death. As we saw with Will or Garrett, if you leave the Night's Watch, you get executed. So you do get the opportunity to join this new life, but once you join this new life, if you lose it, you lose your head. And so Septon Kelladar is like, alright, so like you can take your vow here, you can join the Night's Watch with your vow here in the Sept before the Faith of the Seven, if that's your particular jam. But some of you, especially Northerners, you might not be fans of the Faith of the Seven. It might be that you follow the old gods of the North, of the first men. And so he's like, is there anyone here who follows the old gods instead? And so Jon Snow stands up. And he's like, yeah, I'm a fan of the old gods. I have a different religious flavor. And so Keladar's like, all right, well, if you'd like, since you follow those other gods, you can go take your vow before a heart tree, before a weirwood tree, which is sacred to the old gods, instead of doing it in the Sept. And there isn't a godswood, there isn't a heart tree in Castle Black, but there is one a bit north of the wall. There's a grove with some heart tree, with some weirwood trees in it. So Jon is to go there to take his vow. So it's interesting to see that kind of religious tolerance and diversity at the Night's Watch. Like you could totally imagine the Night's Watch being like a religious institution almost, with its sort of purposefulness and their celibacy and all, but they're not religious. They're tolerant of religion, and they use religion to some extent to sort of back up their ideology. But they're tolerant of lots of different religions at the Night's Watch, at least of the old gods and the Seven. And so they're like, yeah, all right, Jon, so you can go swear your oath before the Night's Watch. But then Sam Tarly stands up. Sam Tarly says up and says, hey, oi, me too. And Sam has sweaty palms. His palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's grease running down his chin already. Tarly spaghetti. He's nervous, but on the surface he looks calm and ready to fat pink mast. Something spaghetti. He all right. And then he's like, Sam's like, yo, I wanna go too, to the old gods. And then everyone's like, wait, what? Like Sam, like Joe Mormont is like, wait, you're from House Tarly. You're from the South, Sam, from House Tarly. Do the Tarlys follow the old gods instead of the Seven? And then Sam's like, no, we follow the Seven at Hornhill, and my father followed the Seven, and my whole family for 1,000 years has followed the faith of the Seven. And Jeremy Renner's like, what? So why would you give up your family's gods? And then Sam's like, well, it's not my family's gods anymore, right? Because I'm joining the Night's Watch and I'm giving up my old identity. And Jeremy's like, yes, right. The ideology that we literally just said is part of the fabric of our being. So again, people don't follow that shit all that closely. But the point is that Sam says, you know what? Yes, my family worship the faith of the Seven, but those gods never helped me, and my family never helped me. So instead, I'm going to pray to the old gods, and maybe they will answer my prayers. So that's pretty interesting. Sam decides to abandon his family gods and to take up new gods, take up Jon Snow's gods, the gods of the North. And indeed, the old gods do seem to keep their eye on Sam later on. Remember, in the scene where Sam kills a White Walker, a couple of books later, there are all those crows or ravens around a tree watching Sam before he fights the White Walker and stuff. There might be a moment in the future where the old gods do indeed finally answer Sam's prayers. But anyway, so they're basically like, all right, fucking whatever, like pick your poison, mate. You can worship whichever gods you want. So it's decided that Jon and Sam will go to take their vows before the old gods in the Grove of the Weirwoods, while everyone else stays in the Sept to do it before the Faith of the Seven. But before they do that, they get sorted into their houses. This is the exciting bit. This is the sorting ceremony. This is the bit in the Philosopher's Stone where everyone's in the Great Hall and the sorting hat is going to sort all of the first years into the different houses. In this case, the houses are the builders, the rangers, and the stewards. The rangers fight stuff beyond the wall, and they're the cool guys who everyone wants to be. They're brave. They are Gryffindor. The builders are the ones who sort of work laboriously and tirelessly to keep the wall standing up, and that's basically Hufflepuff. And then there are the stewards who do the sort of writing and sort of the smart work and the logistics and the management, and that, I suppose, is sort of Ravenclaw. And Jon desperately wants to be a Gryffindor, a ranger, because of course he is Harry Potter. And so he's sitting there going, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, and then everyone's sorted, and it's announced that John is to be among the stewards. Which is like, what? What? John was born to be a Gryffindor, right? John was born to be a ranger, just like his Uncle Ben. Old dead Uncle Ben. Great power, great responsibility. John wanted to be a ranger just like him, but he's been sorted into the stewards, the bloody pencil pushers, the bureaucrats. What's that about? Heroic Jon Snow ain't got no time for management, stewardry. What? So he's like, what the fuck is going on? And he's like, well, there must have been some mistake. He's looking around. He's like, what's going on? Why have I been put into the stewards? And then he sees Alyssa Thorne looking at him. She's staring at him with shiny black eyes. And of course, Alyssa Thorne is Jon Snow's Snape, remember? He's the guy who just sort of inexplicably hates him, but actually seriously has sort of a good cause deep within his nasty mind all along, basically. At least in the show, he sort of does. So John immediately becomes convinced that Alyssa Thorne has somehow intervened to make John's life worse by not letting him join the Rangers. And because basically he's an entitled little Harry Potter wanker. And so then everyone's been sorted into their houses, and so everyone all splits off into their different sections. Rangers with me, says Jeremy Riker. First years with me, Percy Weasley says. And they all split off to go to their common rooms. And then Pip is staring at John with a red face, because he's the Ron Weasley, of course. He's a sort of inept friend who's sort of like, oh, what are you going to do now, Harry? I'm a side character. I say, shit, what are you going to do, Harry? I am a side character. I am a foil. I exist to make the protagonist look cooler, because I'm a freckled ginger, and there hasn't been a protagonist who's a ginger since fucking Pippi Longstockings. That's the last time a ginger was a front character. Protagonists have to be bespectacled, unassuming little white boys with brown hair and cute scars on their foreheads. Didn't you know that's how narratives work now, Harry? That's what Ron says. But of course, Samwell is the Hermione of this situation, the well-read, bookish, unattractive, at the start, person in the trio of friends, who actually is the only person who is hip to the vibe of what is actually going on. So Sam is about to inform John what's really going on, but first, John is sort of sitting there shocked. And then there's more sort of talking. So they talk about the duties of what the stewards are going to be. So Sam is there, Darion the singer is there, John is there, and Sam is told that his job will be to help with Maester Aemon, to do all of some of the writing work and some of the management of the Ravenry and stuff like that, just as John had suggested. Although, of course, it's noted that Chet, the guy Chet, who is currently the servant of Maester Aemon, since Sam is taking over his job, Chet has been sent to the kennels to help with the dogs, and his comfy cell, his comfy room, his pad is being taken over by Sam. And as we learn later, Chet is not very happy with this new arrangement. Not happy, Jan, is how Chet feels about this, because Sam has usurped his comfy job and sent him to go work with the dogs instead, and Chet bears that grudge and expresses it later on. And then they talk to Darion, who ends up tangling in feast. He ends up getting killed by Arya Stark, of all people, but that's far ahead of us. Darion, who's this random other Night's Watch guy, they're saying that, well, you used to be a singer, and you used to, like, hang out with the lords, and you used to, like, eat good food at the lord's table, and because of that, we're going to send you to the East Watch, which is, like, the easternmost castle on the far east of the wall, and they say, well, you're going to help us get good prices when we buy food from the merchants, because since you've actually eaten good food, and you know what good food tastes like, and you actually are informed about sort of some of the ways of sort of, you know, economics and dealing with some of these things, and also we assume you have a high speech skill, you've got a high diplomacy check because of your experience as a singer and all that, you're a high charisma character, Therefore, we're going to use you to help negotiate prices with the merchants, buff your barter skill, all that sort of thing. And that all sort of makes sense. Mormont complains, not Mormont, Bowen Marsh complains that the quality of the olive oil they've been getting lately has been frightful. Now, I think this is this line is quite indicative of the state that the Night's Watch is in currently. Quite soon, the Night's Watch gets into such a sorry state. They all get slaughtered at the Fist of the First Men. They all get attacked by all these fucking whites and shit. Things get very bad for the Night's Watch later on in this book. But here, at the start of the book, one of the problems that is worth mentioning, one of the problems that they are dedicating resources to, is the fact that the quality of the olive oil they've been getting has been frightful. I mean, talk about first world problems, right? Jon Snow in Dance of Dragons would dream of the worst of his problems being poor olive oil. So right now, things are fucking cushy compared to how bad things get later on. And so Jon is told what his duty is going to be as a steward, as a Ravenclaw. He's told that he's going to be working with Lord Commander Mormont. He's going to be like the personal servant of Lord Commander Mormont. And Jon is not very happy about this. So he's like, what, I have to fucking empty out his chamber pot, do I? Wash his old scraggly balls? Is that my fucking job, is it? And Bowen Marsh is like, yep, that's what you gotta do. You just gotta you gotta look after the big man, and that's how it is. And Jon's like, I'm not a fucking servant. I'm a big important Stark boy. I'm Harry Potter, not some fucking Neville Longbottom. I'm important. I play Quidditch good. I don't want to scrub out the fucking mandrake pots. Who are you to tell Harry Potter what to do? That's what Jon says. And then Aemon steps into the conversation, and he's like, mate, be a man. Man the fuck up. Don't be a little entitled boy complaining about not getting what you want. If you want to join the Night's Watch, you gotta stand up to your responsibilities, and you gotta man up, and you gotta do what's required of you, no matter whether you like it or not. And so so we've got this sort of conflict of Jon, whether he's an immature boy or whether he's being a responsible man, and Jon's clearly got a way to go with that yet, because Jon is raging. He wants to have a tanty over the injustice of being put in Ravenclaw instead of Gryffindor. But then Samwell Tarly, the Hermione with her buck teeth and her frizzled hair, sidles up, and she says, but Harry, don't you see? You're actually being the personal servant of Dumbledore. They're grooming you to be the next head professor. And Jon's like, no, but I want to be a Quidditch captain because I'm so good at riding broomsticks. Look at me. Jon's like, I'm the best swordsman here. I'm the best horse rider. I ride a Nimbus 2000. Get on my fucking level, bitch. But then Hermione's like, no, look. But then Daeron, he can be Ron Weasley. So Ron comes in and he's like, look, I was sent to the wall for allegedly raping a girl. But you want to know the truth? She helped me in the window naked. She wanted to have sex with me. This was consensual with capital S. And yet I got falsely accused of rape and sent to the wall. That is not fair. You want to talk about not fair? That is not fair. So don't you fucking complain, you son of a lord, you entitled bastard. Don't you complain about how hard you've got it, because it's me who's got it hard. It's everyone else who's got it hard. You are the 1%, and you can't fucking complain, mate. So that shuts up Jon a little bit. That's basically Neville Longbottom coming up and saying, Harry, you can't complain because my parents were tortured to death by Dumbledore. So don't you fucking complain about not getting to join the Quidditch team, you scarred forehead wanker, is what Neville Longbottom says. And then Hermione is like, yeah, but no, for real, like the reason why this is happening, it's not because they think you're a shitshock. You're being groomed for command. You're going to be hanging out with Lord Mormont, reading his letters, attending his meetings, getting fucking leadership tips from the big man Tyrone himself. You're being groomed for leadership, and you might be the next Lord Commander. And so Jon's like, oh yeah, that's all right. And he also reflects on how that's a common thing that a lot of lords do in Westeros, is they have their heirs, their eldest sons, attend their meetings and become part of their council in order to learn how to be a leader. It's something that Ned did with Robb. And then Jon says, I never asked for this, which is a very Ned Stark sort of a thing to say. And then Sam says, well, none of us are here for asking, because again, you joined the Night's Watch because you fucking wanted to. You thought it would be fun. You thought it's just the choice of what would be the best lifestyle for you. Joining the Night's Watch was a lifestyle choice. Well, for everyone else, almost everyone else here, it was to join the Night's Watch or death. So don't you talk about not choosing this. So Jon's getting a lot of harsh but true truth bombs dumped on his little scarred noggin in this chapter. And then Jon Snow feels shame. Jon has the shame to feel shame. Jon mans up a bit and he's like, okay, all right, you're right. I am being entitled. I am being a prick. So Jon is growing as a character before our very eyes. And Jon admires Sam's courage because even though he's so afraid, he accepts his fate on the wall. And Jon reflects on Benjen's words that on the wall, a man only gets what he earns. That on the wall you grow up or you die. So Jon does the adult thing and he says, okay, you're right. I was being childish. I'm sorry. I was acting like a boy. So good on him. He recognizes his mistake and he grows from it. So 10 points to Gryffindor. And so then they go out beyond the wall to go take their vows before the weirwood trees. They go through the tunnel beneath the wall. Because the wall is thick. Like the wall is thick with 2 C's. It is big. So there's a whole tunnel that goes through the bottom of the wall in order to cross to the other side. It's got 3 gates within the tunnel under the wall, so it's pretty fucking hard to get through the wall if you're not invited, unless you know the secret gate at the Night Fort. And the wall feels very sort of ominous, and it has this sort of magical weight. There's this vast weight above him, and it's colder than a tomb, and blah, blah, blah. And then they emerge from the other side beyond the wall, and Sam's like, you don't think there are any wildlings around here? So as soon as they go beyond the wall, there's immediately a bit of spookery afoot. Like, this is a heebie-jeebie sort of a Jim Jam. This is like a creepy neck of the woods. It's called the Haunted Forest, is what they call the woodlands just beyond the wall. So there's a bit of a creepy place, and we immediately get this sort of magical threat, sort of vibe. And also, Jon's direwolf ghost immediately pops up. Hello, you found a wild Pokemon in the grass. It was a doggo, an albino doggo. It's Ghost, Jon's direwolf. And he turns up and they hang out. And so we get a description of the haunted forest, and it's all ominous and creepy, and and Jon feels a chilly finger tracing a path up his spine because the spooky skeletons are out tonight, and only the gods know what lay ahead. So this is all about establishing that beyond the wall, this is a place where fucking scary, weird, magical stuff can happen, like #White Walkers. And they reach the Grove of the Weirwoods where they're going to take their oath, and there are 9 weirwood trees, 9 sacred old god trees up here with the white bark, the bone pale bark, and the red bloody sappy eyes. And so this is a sacred place to the old gods, and they leave their horses outside the circle of weirwood trees so as not to profane the sacred space. Horses are not permitted intercourse with the gods. Intercourse? They're not allowed discourse, connection with the old gods, because horses are deemed horses probably have their own gods, I would imagine. At least among the Dothraki they would. The Dothraki are a big fan of horses. Do you think the horses are a big fan of men? Probably not. There's this really great Douglas Adams paragraph about how it's very easy to sit on a horse. It's very easy to sit on an animal for weeks on end without ever really considering what its thoughts and feelings might be. However, it's very difficult to be sat on by a creature for weeks on end and not form opinions about that creature. And it's about the sort of resentments that horses feel towards people. Do you think these horses feel resentment that they're being excluded from the little human god worship time? They may well be, or maybe they've got their own better horsey things to do. Horses have a pretty rough trot in Game of Thrones, actually. Get it? Trot? Sorry. Because they get killed all the time, you know? And they keep landing on singers like Marillion. Horses have it rough. But anyway, they come to the sacred place of the old gods, and Sam says, oh, they're watching us because these trees have literal eyes. And of course, it's sort of implied that the way that the old gods work is that the old gods, they're not like these long bearded Jehovian, like immortal god creatures. It's implied that the old gods are the spirits or the ghosts of dead people. Or at least of dead children of the forest, dead greenseers, people like Bran and Bloodraven. When they die, it's implied that they become one with the old gods. They are the old gods. So when we say the old gods are watching, it's kind of suggested loosely, vaguely, that what that might mean is that the actual spirits of the dead are the old gods, and they are watching out through the eyes of the weirwood. The old gods kind of are the dead. Maybe. Which does make them seem a bit more sinister, doesn't it? Are the old gods good guys? Is Bloodraven a good guy? The old gods are all into, blood sacrifice and shit, man, and fucking telekinetic mind control. Look what happened to Hodor. Are the old gods really good guys? Are they gods at all? Very fascinating questions to be asked about the old gods and the children of the forest. What the fuck are they up to? No, nothing good. They made the White Walkers apparently in the show. That's pretty gnarly. They've got crimes to answer for, those guys. But anyway, so Sam and Jon, they start to take their vows as members of the Night's Watch. They are officially joining Hogwarts. They are becoming first years. They're going to take potions classes and Quidditch lessons. And so they take their oaths, and it begins. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. And there are lots of promises and conditions. There's lots of small text when you join the Night's Watch. No one reads all that text when they update iTunes, and you have to say, I agree to this fucking novel-length set of terms and conditions. There's quite a lot of terms and conditions joining the Night's Watch. You have to promise to never marry a wife, never own lands, never father a child, never wear a crown, never win glory. You have to promise to die at your post. And then we are told that the Night's Watch, they are the watchers on the walls. They are the fire that burns against the cold, the light that brings the dawn. And this stuff all seems to connect to the War for the Dawn that happened thousands of years ago, where the Night's Watch first defeated the White Walkers in the Long Night, supposedly. Though, of course, there is a great deal of mystery about how exactly that went down. They are the horn that wakes the sleepers. Some people speculate that that horn might somehow refer to Joramun's horn, the Horn of Winter, the horn that supposedly has the power to bring down the wall. It would be very curious if the Oath of the Night's Watch had reference to a weapon designed to destroy the wall, which is the fortification supposedly built by the Night's Watch. Did the Night's Watch really build the wall? Or might it have been someone else? Someone icier? And they pledge their lives to the Night's Watch. And also, of course, the fact that the whole wearing no crowns and taking no wives, that is an issue for Jon Snow. Because, of course, Jon Snow, as the son of Prince Rhaegar, might arguably have a crown on the Iron Throne, a claim on the Iron Throne. Jon Snow might be king in some sense at some point. But he's sworn not to. But the loophole that many people point out, because as with every religion, as with every rule, there's always a loophole for those willing to find it. And the loophole in these terms and conditions is that it shall not end until my death, is what this oath stipulates. And as it happens, Jon Snow does indeed die. So some people argue that after his resurrection, it should be permissible for him to wear a crown and hold land and to marry a wife and to do all those things. So Jon may be legally off the hook in that respect. And so they take the oath and then they rise as men of the Night's Watch. So Jon is no longer a little kid. Harry is no longer a stranger to Hogwarts. He has been inducted into the club. He has crossed the Campbellian threshold, and he has begun his new. This is like Act 2 beginning. This is like the new beginning of Jon Snow. He's leveled up. He's now a part of the Night's Watch. He's changed. He's grown, and there are new challenges ahead of him. And those new challenges emerge almost immediately, because Tywin, one of the Night's Watch Rangers, says, there's something in the smell of the night that I dislike. And then Ghost, John's direwolf, returns. He was hunting. And he comes back with something in his jaws. And then they realize the Ghost brings the object and drops it on the snow before the gathered Night's Watchmen. And they see it's a hand. It's a black, dead, human hand. Missing its owner, missing its body. It's like the Thing from the Addams Family, except it's dead. And that's a worry. That implies danger, death, destruction, shit is happening. There's immediately a threat which our young Harry Potter needs to use his newfound strength to oppose. There's a troll in the dungeon. Just thought you might like to know. So that is a very exciting end to the chapter. So yeah, it's basically Hogwarts, but things get more complicated later on. I see this as sort of like essential narrative groundwork, because you got to sort of follow certain conventions. I mean, you don't have to, but you know, storytelling, you got to sort of say, all right, the protagonist is a bit of a shit when he starts. He is a bit entitled. He is a bit immature, but he grows through the challenges he faces and becomes a more likable, respectable person. He becomes more heroic, because that's what heroism is at the end of the day. Just like, you know, it's not courage to not be afraid. It's courage to be afraid, but to act anyway. In the same sense that's true, it's not heroic to be a super great guy who does the responsible, challenging thing. It's heroic to start out as a weak, immature shitchuck, but then through trials and tribulations to grow and challenge yourself and develop into someone who is great. That's why that's why the Olympian gods aren't great characters. They aren't great heroes. No one likes to hear stories of Zeus and Apollo and Thor and Odin overcoming obstacles. Well, sometimes you do, but I mean, no one's interested in them as human characters. All the great Greek myths are about the heroes, about Hercules and stuff, and they all do have, you know, superpowers basically. But the reason why they're interesting is because they are human, or at least half human. They have weaknesses, vulnerabilities, sins, and that makes them relatable. But it also makes them heroic in the fact that they strive to be greater. That's what makes a person great. It's not being strong. It's becoming better. No matter how shit you are, so long as you strive to be better. You don't need to be the best, but as long as you work every day to be a better person, that makes you, in the only sense that really matters, heroic. So there's some inspirational ass shit to end this episode of Alt Shift X. I do hope you enjoyed, and remember that there will be a live stream of episode 50 of Alt Shift X this Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Get keen for that. Show up, we'll do some stuff, it'll be great, and you have a lovely day, won't you? Cheers.